What if I told you the life you've been dreaming of isn't just a possibility? It's already happening, right now, somewhere in the infinite field of potential. That version of you who wakes up excited, confident, fulfilled, not waiting for permission or perfect timing, isn't a fantasy. It's not a someday vision. It's real. It exists. And more importantly, you're already connected to it. You've been taught to believe that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is one of action, time, hard work, or luck. But that's an illusion. The real gap is in frequency. It's in alignment. And here's where it gets fascinating. Quantum entanglement shows us that everything, yes, everything, is connected at the deepest level, instantly and permanently. When two particles become entangled, changing one affects the other, no matter how far apart they are in space. Now zoom out and realize you are not separate from the version of you that has already made the leap. You're entangled with them, right now, which means the signal that version is sending can be felt by you, and the signal you send can either amplify or block that connection. You're not missing opportunities. You're not behind. You're simply not yet attuned to the frequency of the version of you that already lives the life you want. Think about that. Your dream life doesn't need to be built. It needs to be remembered. It's not waiting in your future. It's stored in your field, and all you need to do is tune into it, not with force, not with obsession, with coherence, with clarity, with choice. This is where so many people get stuck. They think manifestation is about repeating mantras or setting goals, but the field doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to what you are. And if you are still operating from the identity that sees your dream life as over there, you'll stay locked in a loop of desire without embodiment. But if you can begin to see yourself as already connected, already worthy, already aligned, everything begins to shift. Because you're not trying to create something out of nothing. You're collapsing into the version of you who never questioned if it was real in the first place. This is why quantum entanglement isn't just a concept from physics, it's a map for transformation. It reveals that distance, time, and even identity are flexible. You're already dancing between timelines. The only question is, which one are you reinforcing? Every thought, every belief, every action is a signal, and the field doesn't listen to the loudest signal. It listens to the most consistent one. Let's make this practical. Think back to a time you made a bold decision. Maybe you left a job, walked away from a relationship, took a leap that didn't make logical sense but felt right. Remember that surge of energy, that sense of clarity, that inner knowing that you were stepping into a different version of yourself. That wasn't random. That was you briefly syncing with the timeline you're entangled with, the one where you've already made it. And even if you slipped back into old patterns afterward, that moment was proof. Proof that the connection is real, that your dream life is not an invention, it's a memory in waiting. The moment you stop trying to become that version and start identifying as it, the field begins to rearrange around you. Not slowly, not conditionally, instantly, but only to the degree that your frequency can hold the signal. Now let's go deeper. Quantum entanglement isn't some fringe idea. It's one of the most tested, proven phenomena in quantum physics. Two particles become linked, and no matter how far they drift apart, an instantaneous connection remains. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because it defied classical logic. But here's what no one tells you. This isn't just about particles. It's about consciousness. It's about identity. It's about you. You're not a single, isolated unit of existence. You are a living, breathing, energetic field made up of memory, perception, frequency, and just like those particles, you are entangled with every version of yourself that's ever existed and ever could exist. The you that failed, the you that healed, the you that rose, and the you that already lives in the timeline you're reaching for. These versions are not far, they're not unreachable, they're layered on top of each other, separated only by vibrational states, which means at any moment you can choose which one you sync with. Think of your life like a quantum radio. You're always tuned to some signal. If you're broadcasting fear, you match with the timeline that feeds that fear. If you're embodying certainty, You collapse the wave function into a reality where that certainty becomes your experience. It's not just about thinking differently, it's about being differently. That's what changes the pattern. The universe isn't waiting to bless you, it's responding to the observer. And the observer isn't just your thoughts, it's your identity. So the real work is not to attract your dream life, but to become the version of you that it's already entangled with. When you do that, the quantum field doesn't have a choice. Reality bends, not because you forced it, but because you finally matched it. And here's where everything begins to shift. Once you understand that this connection already exists, you stop chasing and start remembering. You stop asking how and start asking who. Who am I right now? Who am I being? And is this identity in sync with the one that already lives the life I desire? If the answer is no, the work isn't to fix your life. The work is to shift the self that's observing it. Because in the quantum model, the observer creates the outcome. Change the observer, change the outcome, change the identity, change the timeline. You don't need to create the dream. You just need to stop broadcasting from the version of you that doesn't believe it's already yours. That's the jump. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Here's the truth most people never realize. The thing holding them back isn't their circumstances, their past, or even their fear. It's their identity. It's the silent, familiar version of themselves they've been unconsciously loyal to. And that version is powerful, not because it's right, but because it's consistent. Most people are trying to jump into a new life while dragging their old self with them. But you can't step into a new timeline if the observer behind your eyes is still entangled with limitation, fear, and doubt. You can't shift your reality by dressing up the same self in new affirmations. The quantum field doesn't respond to appearances, it responds to coherence. And coherence begins when the old identity is released, not ignored, not resisted, but consciously collapsed. You have to understand this. Identity is not just who you think you are, it's the energetic filter that interprets your entire reality. It's the pattern running in the background, shaping your decisions, emotions, behaviors, and ultimately, the timeline you live in. If the identity you're living from is rooted in survival, self-doubt, scarcity, or trauma, no matter how much you try to change your life on the surface, you'll always find yourself looping back into the same energetic field. That's why some people keep repeating the same relationship dynamics, the same financial struggles, the same emotional patterns, because the timeline doesn't change until the self does. Not the surface self, the core observer. That's the real glitch in the matrix. People are trying to manifest new results with an identity that's incompatible with the reality they're asking for. So the question isn't, how do I get there? The question is, who is still observing my life right now? Is it the version of you who doubts they can have more? Is it the one who's still waiting for external validation? Who believes they need to be fixed, healed, or approved before they're allowed to receive? If so, you're not broken. You're just entangled with a past version of yourself that no longer fits your future. And that's where the work begins, not with action, not with strategy, but with collapse, the conscious, intentional decision to stop being loyal to the identity that's generating the reality you say you're ready to leave. This is what most people avoid. They want the result, but they're afraid of what they'll have to let go of. And it's not always the pain that's hard to release. It's the familiarity, the comfort of knowing who you are, even if that self is suffering. Because here's the secret. The identity that's holding you back isn't bad. It was built to protect you. It was constructed in moments of fear, confusion, trauma, and survival. It was built when you didn't know you had access to something more, so it makes sense that it's hard to let it go. But just because it was useful then doesn't mean it's aligned now. The moment you stop identifying with that old self, the field starts moving. That's the collapse, that's the quantum shift, and it happens the instant you stop feeding the identity that no longer serves the life you're ready to live. This is where timeline jumping gets misunderstood. People think it's about escaping into a better future, but it's not. It's about collapsing the energetic structure that's holding you in a loop. You don't jump by fantasizing about a new life. You jump by letting the old self die, and not just in thought, but in embodiment. You don't just say you're done, you act like you're done. You stop defending that version of you. You stop negotiating with it. You stop letting it speak for your present. Because as long as that self is making your decisions, you'll keep reinforcing the same signal into the field and getting the same results back. Now let's go deeper into what it actually means to jump timelines. It's not about traveling somewhere. It's not even about changing your external life first. It's about collapsing the identity that's been collapsing your current timeline. Imagine your life as a stream of possibilities, all of them real, all of them accessible, but the one you're living is the one that matches the signal your identity is broadcasting. And that identity is the observer, the signal, the anchor. If you keep observing from fear, you collapse the timeline that feeds more fear. If you observe from lack, you collapse more lack. But when you shift the observer, the timeline shifts with it, not as a reward, but as a reflection. So how do you collapse the identity? Not by fighting it, not by judging it, but by witnessing it, feeling it, becoming radically honest about what version of you has been running the show. What do they believe about money, love, purpose, success? What story are they still repeating? When you become aware of that imprint, you take back your power. And in that space of awareness, you say, this is no longer who I am. That's the severing. That's the recalibration. Not because you're trying to be someone else, but because you're remembering who you were before the pattern took over. This is why the jump doesn't start with a leap. It starts with a funeral. You must be willing to let the old version of you die. The one who waited, the one who hesitated, the one who played small, the one who called fear logic and called self-abandonment safety. That version can't come with you, not because they're unworthy, but because they're incompatible with what you're calling in. This is not about becoming something new. It's about stopping the performance of being someone you no longer are. You're not faking it until you make it. You're remembering it until you embody it. And here's what happens next. When you collapse the old self and begin broadcasting a new signal, not just through thought, but through embodiment, the field responds. Not in theory, but in form. People show up differently. Opportunities appear, challenges reframe. But more than that, you feel different. The static clears, the fog lifts. You start making decisions that would have scared the old self. You speak with clarity that used to feel impossible. You stop tolerating things you once begged to keep. And all of that is proof that the jump has already happened. You didn't force it. You didn't beg for it. You became it. And the field had no choice but to rearrange. That's the quantum rule. The observer collapses the wave. So choose the observer that's already living the life you want and watch the timeline collapse around you. You are always entangled with something. Every moment of every day, you are locked into an energetic feedback loop with a version of yourself. The question is, which one? Are you still entangled with the self who plays small, who doubts their power, who hesitates to speak their truth? Or are you ready to re-entangle with the version of you that knows their worth, moves with certainty, and no longer negotiates with limitation? Because the quantum field responds not to your thoughts or wishes, but to the version of you that you consistently embody. Your identity is the transmitter. Your life is the reflection. And you've been broadcasting your signal all along, whether you knew it or not. Most people spend their lives reinforcing timelines they claim to want to escape from. They talk about change, dream of freedom, and hope for transformation, but then wake up and choose the same behaviors, the same thoughts, the same energetic posture. Why? Because they're still entangled with the version of themselves that can't see beyond the loop. And the loop isn't life doing something to you, it's life mirroring the you that you haven't yet let go of. The version of you who tolerates mediocrity, who makes decisions from fear, who holds onto relationships that drain instead of fuel. That version is a frequency, and that frequency is binding you to a timeline that doesn't serve your evolution. You cannot live a new life from an old signal. This is where entanglement becomes practical. You can shift your entanglement at any time, not through effort or force, but through clarity. You collapse the old signal not by fighting it, but by choosing something incompatible with it. It begins with a decision that says, this is no longer who I am, not as a mantra, but as a state. Speak it aloud if you must. Say it until your body listens. I release the self that doubts. I release the self that delays. I collapse this observer. I choose again. You'll feel resistance. That's normal. The old self fights for survival, not because it's bad, but because it's familiar. But the moment you stop reacting from that self, the moment you stop feeding it with your focus, your language, your behavior, it begins to dissolve. The entanglement weakens, and in that space, a new signal is born. But how do you know which version of you to entangle with? Here's the secret. You already do. You've already felt them. You've seen them in flashes, in moments of courage, in gut-level clarity, in fleeting seconds where something inside you whispers, "This is who I really am." Those aren't fantasies. Those are memories from a future you. Signals from a timeline that's already alive, already unfolding, already waiting for you to catch up. And the only reason it feels far away is because you keep tuning back into the frequency of the self that doubts those signals. But when you begin to move as if that future is now, when you speak, walk, choose and breathe as if it's already yours, the field doesn't delay. It responds instantly, not because it's rewarding you, because it's reflecting you. Think of the moments in your life when something shifted instantly. You made a choice and everything changed. Not gradually, immediately. A relationship ended and you felt lighter. A boundary was drawn and your energy returned. A decision was made and your mind got quiet. These weren't coincidences. They were timeline jumps. They happened the moment you acted from a new identity, and you've experienced them more than once. But because you didn't yet know how to stabilize the new entanglement, the old self pulled you back. That's not failure. That's the feedback loop showing you where your coherence slipped. You've already jumped, multiple times. The question isn't whether you can. The question is whether you're ready to make those jumps permanent. Whether you're willing to keep choosing the new signal even when the world hasn't caught up yet. Because the field doesn't change first. You do. You decide. You embody. You send the signal. And then, slowly at first, and then suddenly, the timeline reorders, not because of magic, because of alignment. This is where it gets even deeper. You don't just choose the new version of yourself once. You choose them moment by moment, in how you respond when fear rises, in how you carry yourself when no one's watching, in the way you speak to yourself in silence. Because that's where entanglement is strengthened, not through grand gestures, but through subtle decisions made in the stillness of the present. Every breath is a vote. Every decision is a recalibration. Every choice is a signal. The future isn't out there waiting. It's entangled with every moment you live from your truth. And here's the most beautiful part. You've already met this future version of you. Not just in dreams or visions, but in those rare, sacred moments when time slowed and you felt something bigger moving through you. That wasn't fiction. That was resonance. That was your highest self reaching across the quantum field, saying, "I'm still here. Don't forget me." Those moments are guideposts. They are breadcrumbs on the path to alignment. And the more you honor them, the more you re-entangle with that version of you. The field doesn't need your effort. It needs your remembrance. So if you've ever felt the tug of something greater, the quiet pull of a life that feels both impossible and familiar, that's not wishful thinking. That's your signal. That's your confirmation. And the only thing standing between you and that timeline is the identity you keep choosing to embody. You are always entangled with a version of yourself, and you are always free to change that connection. The field is listening. The signal is live. The only question is, which version of you are you letting speak? Every reality you've ever experienced was not created by the world around you. It was shaped by the observer within you. That's the fundamental principle most people never grasp. Reality doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. You are the observer, and the observer is not passive. The observer determines what gets collapsed from the infinite field of possibilities into form. But here's the catch. Your current observer, the identity behind your choices, is not neutral. It's entangled with a specific timeline. And unless you change the observer, the timeline cannot shift. You don't need to change your job, your relationships, your environment. Not yet. You need to change who's doing the observing. Because if the one looking through your eyes is still rooted in fear, in lack, in the identity of someone who doubts their power, then no matter how much you want a different life, you'll keep collapsing the same one. This is where everything begins to change, when you stop trying to change your life from the outside in and instead change the self that is interpreting it. You've probably been trying to upgrade your reality while staying loyal to the version of you who created the old one. That's like trying to build a new house on top of a crumbling foundation. Until the observer shifts, the structure stays the same. And here's what no one tells you. The field doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. You can journal your goals, visualize your dreams, script your perfect day, but if the self doing those things is still operating from a frequency of not having, of not being, of not knowing, it collapses the same timeline again and again. This is why it's not about changing the scenery, it's about changing the lens. Ask yourself, who is the version of me that's collapsing this timeline? What do they believe about themselves, about the world, about what's possible? How do they speak? How do they act when no one's around? Because that's the signal you're sending. You are the projector, not the screen. Your state of being is casting the film onto reality, and what you see isn't truth. It's reflection. So if you don't like the movie you're watching, stop trying to edit the scenes and start replacing the one behind the lens. That's what collapsing the observer means, not destroying yourself, but disidentifying from the self that no longer serves your becoming. It's realizing that you are not your thoughts, not your trauma, not your habits. Those are echoes of a previous broadcast. But the observer, the awareness behind it all, is pure potential. And in any moment, you can reboot. You can decide that the version of you who plays small is not the one you'll let steer your life anymore. That's not delusion, that's quantum integrity. And the moment you do this, not think it, not wish it, but embody it, you feel it. A shift, subtle but undeniable. The noise begins to fade, and something new emerges, a steadiness, a clarity. A different version of you begins to take the wheel. But here's the thing about change. It doesn't matter how profound the insight is, how deep the realization. If you don't anchor it, it fades. That's the second part of the shift. Embodiment. You've collapsed the old observer. Now you must stabilize the new one. This is the part that separates temporary highs from permanent transformation. It's not about intensity, it's about consistency. The old version of you may no longer be in control, but it's still echoing. You'll hear it in your thoughts, feel it in your body, see it reflected in people who are still tuned to your past signal. And this is where most people fall back. They confuse the echo with failure. But it's not failure, it's recalibration. It's feedback. The nervous system, the subconscious, the emotional body, they need time to realign with the new frequency. Your job is not to react, it's to remember. Every moment you choose the new identity, even when it's hard, you reinforce the signal. Anchoring doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect. It means making decisions as your future self, even when the present looks unchanged. When the bank account is low, but you choose to feel abundance. When you're alone, but you speak like someone who is already deeply loved. When the doubt rises, but you act from certainty anyway. This is what coherence looks like. Not chasing proof, but becoming the proof. The universe doesn't respond to how badly you want it. It responds to how consistently you embody it. This is how timelines solidify, not by force, but by resonance. You'll notice something shift the more you anchor. Things that used to trigger you lose their charge. People who once drained your energy no longer feel magnetic. Situations that used to throw you off course begin to bounce off you like static. That's not coincidence, that's alignment. That's the field reorganizing itself around a new core frequency. You've become unshakable, not because life stopped testing you, but because you stopped collapsing back into the old identity when it did. This process isn't linear, it's quantum. Which means the transformation can feel sudden, chaotic, unpredictable. You might wake up one day and feel like everything's changed. Then the next day, it feels like nothing has. That's normal. That's the echo fading. Keep choosing, keep aligning, keep responding as the version of you who already lives the life you desire. Not because you're faking it, but because you are it. You've remembered, you've reconnected, You've collapsed the observer, and now, through every breath, every choice, every silent moment of alignment, you anchor the new signal into your field, and reality follows, because it has no choice. There's a moment when everything quiets, not because the world changed, but because you did. You're no longer waiting, no longer asking, no longer proving. You've dropped the performance. You've stopped pretending to be someone who's still trying to get there. That's embodiment. That's the beginning of becoming. Most people try to force change through effort, through endless doing, through controlling every detail of the external world. But in the quantum model, it's not your effort that matters. It's your energetic signature. You don't manifest the life you want by chasing it. You become the frequency that makes it inevitable, not because you earned it, but because you matched it. There's a difference between thinking as your future self and living as them. Thinking still leaves space for doubt. Living leaves no room for contradiction. When you live from your future identity, you stop needing constant evidence. You stop measuring progress by how fast results show up. You already know they're coming because the signal you're broadcasting is coherent, consistent, stable. This is the shift from intention to embodiment, from wanting to being. And when your state of being changes, reality bends, subtly at first. A conversation that goes differently, an idea that sparks out of nowhere, a synchronicity that's too specific to ignore. Not miracles, just reflections of the new identity you've chosen to anchor. This is where you stop negotiating with your limitations. You stop asking for permission. You stop entertaining thoughts that don't belong to the version of you you've stepped into. You stop arguing with old emotions, and you start witnessing them instead. Not everything needs to be healed before you move forward. Not everything needs to be figured out before you act. That's the trap of the old self. The one that delays by needing more time, more signs, more reassurance. The future version of you doesn't wait. They decide, and that decision made in the present shifts the entire field. You may not even notice it right away. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with a feeling, a deep, grounded knowing. Your nervous system stops panicking in familiar situations. Your thoughts stop looping around problems that used to consume you. You speak less, but when you do, the words feel like truth. That's not coincidence. That's the nervous system catching up with the new timeline. That's the body adjusting to a frequency it once thought was unsafe. You're no longer surviving in the old field. You're stabilizing in the new one. And this stability doesn't come from fake confidence. It comes from coherence, the inner alignment between who you are, how you feel, and how you move. The observer who once collapsed timelines rooted in fear has been replaced, not through force, but through repetition, through breath, through choice. This is how the new timeline becomes normal. Not by pushing away the old reality, but by starving it of your attention, by no longer feeding the self that created it. And over time, without even trying, you stop reacting to life from the wound. You respond from truth. You choose from wholeness. That's when people start telling you that you seem different, even though you haven't said anything. That's when things you used to chase begin to show up unannounced. Not because they suddenly became available, but because you finally became available to receive them. Now, you begin to notice something else. The old version of you doesn't feel real anymore. Their thoughts sound foreign. Their habits feel heavy. Their limitations no longer fit the way they used to. You've outgrown the story, and in that space, the field begins to reorder. You're not chasing a new life. You're becoming the person who no longer needs to chase. And from that place, manifestation isn't a ritual. It's a side effect. It's what naturally happens when the inner reality becomes so stable that the external has no choice but to match it. But the work isn't over. Jumping into a new timeline is only the beginning. Now comes the real challenge: integration. The field will test your consistency, not as punishment, but as feedback. Old triggers may resurface. Old patterns might try to reassert themselves. Not because you failed, but because echoes take time to fade. The timeline you just left had years of momentum. It knows how to find you. It will come disguised as temptation, distraction, nostalgia, even comfort. But you'll know it by how it feels, heavy, small, misaligned. When that happens, you don't need to resist it, you just need to not feed it. Integration means making 1,000 small decisions every day that align with your new frequency. It means becoming unshakable, not by force, but by trust. Trust in your choice. Trust in your identity. Trust in the field that reflects it all. And over time, that trust becomes your baseline. The new timeline stops feeling like a vision and starts feeling like home. The version of you that used to only exist in your imagination becomes the one that responds to life, speaks in relationships, makes money, sets boundaries, and holds space. Without effort, without pretending, just naturally, because you've stabilized the frequency. So the real question becomes, how do you live once the jump has happened? You stop looking back, you stop reaching forward, you start responding to everything, challenges, successes, moments of silence, from the identity you've already chosen. You make that version your default, and when the world tests it, you hold the line. You breathe through the doubt, you return to the signal, you become immune to the seduction of old stories. That's how you make the jump irreversible. You're not hoping anymore, you're remembering, you're not chasing alignment, you are alignment. Every breath is a signal, every thought is an instruction, every action is a confirmation. You are entangled with the timeline that used to feel like a dream. And now, it's your baseline, your normal, your truth. This is what quantum embodiment looks like, not mystical, but precise, not fleeting, but grounded. And from this place, you don't just change your life. You change the field around you. You shift others by showing them what's possible, not by preaching, but by being. You become a new pattern in the quantum, a new resonance that others can feel. That's the real ripple. That's the real power. Not that you jumped, but that you stayed, that you chose, that you became.